Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to episode 57 of Oil Matters from Argus Media on Wednesday, the 7th of January. Crude futures in early trade this morning stood below $60 per barrel for ICE Brent, and we're headed towards $56 for NYMEX WTI, both down by between $4 and $5 from levels seen in early December. Physical crude stands rather better supported, with North Sea Dated closing last night near $63 and WTI Cushing at $58. The slump in futures hinged on developments around Venezuela, which we'll come to momentarily, but it's worth pointing out that a broader sweep of geopolitical issues was already dominating news flow over the latter stages of December. Hopes have faded around any Russian interest for now in engaging with a US-brokered peace deal for Ukraine. Anti-government protests in Iran have met with a violent response, leading President Trump to again threaten a military strike if Tehran continues to attack protesters. Tensions soared between China and Japan following the Japanese Prime Minister's comments that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could provoke a military response. Then, extensive Chinese naval exercises encircled Taiwan, reportedly involving 10 hours of rocket launches into the waters surrounding the island. And last week saw Saudi airstrikes on UAE-backed southern separatist forces in Yemen at Bokala, though inter-Gulf tensions did not prevent 8 OPEC+ ministers on Sunday agreeing to stick with a plan to hold their production unchanged during January to March. All of this, of course, has subsequently been overshadowed by US Special Forces and law enforcement agents' capture in Caracas of Venezuelan President Maduro and his wife early on Saturday, and their subsequent appearance on Monday at a New York court charged with narco-trafficking offenses. The US's precision military incursion and abduction of the Venezuelan leader have been roundly condemned by China, Russia, Iran, and several Latin American leaders, with some Western governments also questioning the seizure's legality. Similar qualms have been expressed internationally over President Trump's assertion that the US now effectively runs Venezuela, and that US oil companies will be tasked with resurrecting a Venezuelan oil and gas sector completely hollowed out by over 25 years of state appropriation and underinvestment, and a flight of qualified personnel and capital. In 2025, Venezuela produced around 1 million barrels per day of crude and condensate, exporting 700 to 800,000 barrels per day of largely heavy sour crude, with 500,000 barrels per day heading to China, predominantly in shadow fleet vessels. The successive Chavez and Maduro regimes have therefore presided over a slump in Venezuelan crude supply, with production having averaged 3.5 million barrels per day back in 1998, along with 2.4 million barrels per day of exports. However, even a partial reinstatement of formal supply levels is likely to require a decade or more of investment, which itself is likely to run into multiple tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars. Such a scenario seems highly unlikely, as long as the bulk of Venezuela's existing Bolivarian regime remains in place. Newswire reports suggest the Trump administration has decided that interim President Delcy Rodriguez and other Maduro regime officials are best placed for now to maintain stability in Venezuela. Since mid-December, the US has augmented pre-existing sanctions on Venezuela with a maritime blockade, leading to a slump in tankers leaving Venezuelan ports, filling up crude storage and risking widespread production shut-ins. As a result, Yesterday, Trump announced plans to sell between 30 and 50 million barrels of sanctioned Venezuelan oil, currently in floating and onshore storage, into the U.S. Gulf Coast refining system at market prices. Proceeds of up to $1.9 billion would apparently be controlled by Trump and, quote, used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States, unquote. This story obviously has much further to run, although in the short term it could clearly upend heavy sour crude market dynamics on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Be sure to check out Argus Global Markets and Petroleum Argus on Friday for more on this evolving drama, alongside Argus Consulting's latest crude and refined products outlook. And head to argusmedia.com to register for our Argus Americas Crude Summit taking place in Houston during the 2nd to the 4th of February. That's all for now, but see you next time for another Oil Matters from Argus Media.